Welcome to the Oral History Podcast, which features stories from the oral history website, voicesofoklahoma.com, where Oklahomans have given generously of their time to tell their life story for present-day listeners and for the generations to come. Our entire collection is available at voicesofoklahoma.com. By subscribing to our podcast, you will be notified of new Oklahoma oral history podcasts. So now listen to another interesting storyteller from voicesofoklahoma.com.
David Easton was one of the world's most sought-after interior designers and architects. He was noted in the 1980s for his English-style houses, catering to a clientele with a taste for grandeur. David Easton was named to the Interior Design Hall of Fame in 1992. David was born in Louisville, Kentucky in 1937 and was smitten by design from an early age, visiting Marshall Field's department store in Chicago with his grandmother, where he was delighted by the fantasy and design of the store's trend house. He moved to New York City in 1959 and received an architecture degree from Pratt Institute. David won the Fontainebleau Scholarship that allowed him to study in Europe before returning to New York, where he worked with modern furniture designer Edward Wormley. Then, in 1967, he joined the well-known firm Parish-Hadley before starting his own practice in 1972. David could design Georgian mansions on the back of a napkin, making his name creating extraordinary architectural designs for media barons of the 1980s. While living in New York, David met Jimmy Steinmeyer in 1975. Jimmy, a native Tulsan, graduated from Edison High School, moved to New York, and graduated from Pratt Institute. He became a celebrated artist and was known for his highly detailed architectural renderings. After living in New York for more than 4 decades, David and Jimmy moved to Tulsa 4 years prior to David's death due to complications of dementia, October 29, 2020. Now you can hear Jimmy Steinmeyer tell you about his life with David Easton on the Oral History website, voicesofoklahoma.com.
My name is John Erling, and today's date is May 12th, 2021. Jimmy, would you state your full name, please?
James Steinmeyer.
Did you have a middle name?
Oh, yeah, Melvin.
All right. Did you try to avoid that?
Exactly. It was my father's name. He didn't like it, but why would he give it to me?
Right.
I don't know.
Your date of birth?
July 10th, 1950.
And your present age?
70 years old.
And where are we recording this interview?
We're in our study at our house on 35th Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
I got to say, this is my first interview after COVID has been relaxed, the COVID restrictions. I've done most of them by phone. So you're my first in-person interview. How did COVID affect you and your life?
Like with everybody, you were just sort of like, how am I going to do this? What will I do? How will I manage my life? And I was lucky because I had an office that I could go to every day because it's just myself and my assistant, Sean. So he has his office, I have mine. So we felt very comfortable. He was being very safe because he had had a heart attack a few years ago. So he had to be careful. And I basically was a monk. So I didn't do anything. I'd see people, but, didn't go anywhere, didn't do anything. So I felt, it was very strange doing it. But everybody managed through.
And you were fortunate because your work, you could continue working.
Yeah, we could continue working. Certain things maybe were delayed, but everybody was trying to figure out how they were going to work,
And so on this day, 2021, the inoculations are proceeding, and we still don't have a herd immunity as of yet. Okay, we're here to tell the story of David Easton, architect, interior designer. We could also describe him in many other ways.
Yes, for sure.
But first, a little more about you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, where were you born?
I was born here in Tulsa, St. John's Hospital.
And your mother's name and where she came from and grew up?
Dorothy Willebrandt was her maiden name. She was born in Washington, Kansas. In 1922, I think.
What was she like? Describe her personality.
She was very loving. She was very sweet. She was very tough when she needed to be. And, she was a great cook, a great homemaker. She kept everything running all the time. And when I was first born with my brother, my older brother, Jack, my dad did a lot of traveling. So she was by herself for long periods of time. And so she sewed and took care of us.
Right. Then your father's name?
Is Melvin George Steinmeyer.
And then where did he come from?
He was born outside of St. Louis in Collinsville, Illinois. And I forget the date. He died when I was when I was 30 years old.
Well, then you said he was gone. What was his profession?
He had an insulation contracting business. So they insulated factories and all commercial kind of projects. They didn't do any residential work, but he did that after the war. My father and mother met during the war, and they moved to Tulsa because it was a young, kind of thriving city, and they both did not want to be in Kansas or in Illinois, and they thought, why don't we go there? So they came here.
Mm-hmm. We're going to be talking about houses. What was the first house you remember here in Tulsa?
Probably when I was in high school. Well, I remember all the houses that are around here in Forest Hills and all those beautiful houses. But I met a young guy who was in my class, Bill Martin. His mother was Aileen Martin, and she taught cooking. But she loved France, and she loved French interiors. And so I remember going over to his house one day, and I walked into the entry hall, and there was this beautiful French commode and a blooming azalea tree right next to it. And you looked out to the backyard, and there was these French curtains that were tied back, all kind of pale blue silk. And I thought, this is how I want to live. And just a vivid memory of that.
Right.
Yeah.
What area of town did you live in?
Well, I was right here in Brookside is where I was born. Yeah, right. Or where we lived when I was growing up.
All right.
And then we moved over to I guess it would be called Branch Acres, 33rd and Delaware. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, then the first school you attended?
I went to Elliott for elementary school. Then I went to Wright for junior high school, and then to Edison.
All right. You are an artist. Mm-hmm. When did you feel your first artist ability and interest began to shine, show through?
Well, I guess believe it or not, in second grade, for some odd reason, we were taught perspective drawing. I don't know quite why or anything, but I loved it. I found it so fascinating. So that sort of started it. And then in junior high school, one of the electives you could always take was mechanical drawing. And you kind of did just kind of silly drawings that were mechanically based. And then you started doing floor plans and things like that. So that's what I really became interested in. But I always liked to draw, and I liked to paint. But I just sort of, a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Right. You said perspective?
Perspective drawing.
What's that?
You have 2 points, and they're vanishing points. And everything, if you look at things, everything goes back into certain points, and you can draw anything like that. And so that's what I was taught. And I found that fascinating. Like, oh my God. And you started noticing, that's how all that perspective works in buildings. And you look down and how everything goes back into a diminishing, or a diminishing point, I guess.
That was really something in the second grade, isn't it?
I don't know quite why. I guess it was just sort of, and it was, some people obviously, like a lot of things, you either catch on to it very quickly or find it fascinating, or you just don't care. But anyway, I thought that was just really interesting. I loved it.
You remember that teacher's name?
I don't. I wish I did.
And that was at
Elliott.
Wow.
Yeah.
So many teachers have been so influential in all these stories that I've been telling. What do you think in Tulsa, like in Edison? what did you do for entertainment? Were you active in Edison?
Oh, yeah. I was active in student council and all that stuff, and Key Club, and, all the things you thought you probably needed to do so you could get into college. But I wasn't sports minded at all. I played golf, but that was it. But I really wasn't on the golf team, and I didn't, so that was about it. But
so when you graduated from Edison,
1968,
and then you knew that you had this artist thing,
but I didn't know quite what to do or how to go about it, and so I went to Drury College in Springfield, Missouri, and I was there for a year, and I was like, oh, I don't like this. I really want to go to art school. So I applied, and my dad said, no, you can't go. I had gotten into Parsons School of Design in New York. And he said, no, can't go. I said, well, then I'll get my business degree. But when I finish, I'm going to go. And he said, okay. I said, okay. So we kind of left it at that. And so I went through Drury College and got a business degree like he wanted me to do.
So how long did that take?
4 years.
So he was probably hoping that you'd forget about this.
Yeah, forget about it. And I didn't really know what I was going to do, how I would go do whatever, but I know he had no clue how I would make a living and how are you going to support yourself. So that was what he was concerned about. But he always thought if you had a business degree, you could do something.
So a lady by the name of Betty Conheim,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
She gets involved in your life here.
Yeah. So when I was in college, I worked for Betty on let's say on spring break or holidays and things like that, and loved it and found it fascinating. And so when I graduated from college, I went to work for her for a year, and which I loved. And, she had great taste. She had something called the Carlin Shop. It was where the Helmerich and Payne building was, where now it's called the Robert Davis building. They're on 21st and Utica.
Yes.
So it was in there, and she was on the ground floor next to Sadie's Dress Shop, which was a very fancy ladies' dress shop. And I think World Travel was there. Anyway, but she had a beautiful shop, and I worked there and doing a little bit of everything and loved it.
And like what? What would you?
I always was very good using my hands. So I covered frames for her and just odds and ends of things that were that needed to be done with your hands, so to speak. We'd cover waste paper baskets in beautiful fabrics and things like that. So I would do that. And then just kind of there. She had beautiful presents were always wrapped beautifully there. And we had to do that. And it was just a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But I loved it because you got to see so many things, because she carried Cortese linens. She had Guérin hardware. She had antiques. And it was set up like someone's home. It was just absolutely beautiful.
And again, that was at the corner of 21st and Utica.
Utica.
Right. And so you worked there
just for a year. And my father one day said, we should buy Betty's business so I would have something to do. And so anyway, one Saturday, we have a meeting with Betty, with my dad and myself. And my dad brings this up. And Betty's very polite and listens. And she's finally looked at him and said, that's what you want. That's not what Jim wants or needs to do. And so the meeting ended quickly. And we went home. I come down to work on Monday, and Betty said, you need to leave town. Apply to school in New York. You'll get in. I know lots of people in New York. I'll make sure you have a job. Just leave. And so I applied to Pratt at that point, and I got in. And in a month, I moved to New York, and she made sure I had a job, which I had a job with Carl Springer, who was a great furniture designer, and I worked for him while I was going to Pratt.
Okay, there's got to be something here when you told your parents, mm-hmm. I'm walking out that door and I'm going to New York.
Well, because I had to remind my dad that I'm going to go to art school or design school or whatever. And you said I could after I got my business degree. Well, I've done it. I'm going to go. And he said, I know. Okay, you can go.
So maybe he paid for your plane ticket?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, they were very generous. I paid for school, and I had a place to live, obviously, and they paid for all that. So, yeah.
Do you think your business degree helped you, though, in the long run in life?
Oh, maybe just to have practical knowledge about it, but I don't, what I needed to do or what I have been doing, no. it was not.
All right. So you worked with Carl Springer, a furniture designer. What did you do there?
Again, I worked with this wonderful, crazy Russian lady, Valentina Jovakovsky, and we covered frames. We covered little telephone tables that he was kind of famous for, and we made these beautiful telephone books. Everybody had a telephone book then, with you'd write all your addresses and telephone numbers in, and we made those, and they were all covered in exotic skins and leathers and all kinds of stuff. So 3 days a week I worked there, and then the other days I was at Pratt going to school. And, I would go out on jobs and help deliver things, and I loved it, because I got to see so much. I got to see so much of New York and apartments in New York. All of a sudden you get in to see things that, unless you knew who lived there, you wouldn't see it. But I got, when you deliver things, you get to see it.
Right.
So it was great fun.
All of this was laying groundwork for you, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But then you left Springer, I suppose, at some time.
Well, yeah, in fact, that's where I met David, when I was working at Carl Springer's. And so, anyway, somehow, we got together, and then he said, you have this ability to draw. Why don't you draw? But at first I went to work for a decorator, Kevin McNamara, for about a year and a half. And David always wanted to do things and go places. And so I was always asking, do you mind if I take 4 days off? Or do you mind if I do this? And Kevin was always very nice. And finally, it was just kind of the point where, this is not fair to Kevin. And so anyway, I love working for Kevin. He was a great decorator. It was great fun. But so then I started doing renderings.
So that was real key. And then I met David.
Yes.
That just changed your whole life, right?
Oh,
there.
yeah, completely.
And where was he in his life and career when you met him?
Oh, he was established. He had his own business, and he had worked, he had gone to Pratt also and had an architecture degree. And so he had worked with Edward Wormley for a couple of years, and then he worked for Valerian Rebar for a few years, and then he worked for Parish-Hadley. And then he went to work on his own, probably about 1972, I think. And I met David in 1975.
Okay. But with Kevin McNamara, he saw the ability that you could draw and do architectural renderings, right?
Yeah.
And then you concentrated, I believe, on those renderings for designers. Is that true?
Once I left Kevin, I said, David was kind of like, what am I going to do? And David said, well, you can draw. You can do interior renderings for decorators, and there's plenty of people want to have that done. Just start, and just, you don't have to worry about making a living right now. And we were living together, and he said, don't worry about anything. Just do that. So I did. And I was very fortunate.
And voila, your work has been featured in London, in Paris, the Sydney, Australia galleries, the National Academy in New York are all there. Huh?
Yeah. So I was very fortunate. David was sweet and quite a good life partner and a good mentor and just everything. I was very fortunate.
Well, if he were sitting here right now, he'd be saying nice things about you too. So this was a great combination, because it became business, and then he became your life partner too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you could have been just a business associate, but no, it was a combo.
Yeah. I mean, it started out just being, we were together and, just partners and not working together then. I was just he had his business and he had a partner in business. And anyway, so I was not part of his business for quite a while.
Right.
Yeah.
Those who have followed Charles Faudré will remember the beautiful renderings featured in his first book on French country design. And you were part of that book. You and Charles became lifelong friends. Yeah,
I forget when I actually met Charles. It was when he moved here from Muskogee with Francie. It was right after Francie got a divorce. And anyway, Charles said, let's get out of Muskogee. Let's go to Tulsa and we'll open up a shop. And so they did. And it was probably about 1978, maybe, I think. And he was living in a house, very nice duplex on 21st between, where was that? Between Peoria and Boston, I think. And kind of that old area of Tulsa were beautiful old homes. They were for the oil rich at one point. And anyway, I met Charles through a friend, Dinah Corley, and we just became instant friends. And so my mother was still living at that point. And so I would come out to see her, and I would see Charles, and then I would, it just kind of went on from there. We became great friends.
And then you remain close to Francie, Charles' sister, of course, and her husband, Dale Gilman. Mm-hmm. And in fact, you've used Dale's talent to design several custom tables, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. Dale's a great source for, he loves making things and just anything. He likes a project and he likes a challenge. So it's fun to, try to talk with him and say, can you do this? And we talk it over and he can more than likely do it.
Right. It's so interesting. All these people in your life that come together as friends, they become a part of your professional life too.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, always. Yeah.
And of course, you have your studios, Easton Steinmeyer Studios, just off Peoria and Brookside.
Right.
And I think Dale created some things there for you.
Right.
In fact, you've helped in the refurbishing of the Southern Hills Country Club. Mm-hmm. What did you do there? Well,
Charles did the original when they really did a big renovation of the place and added on to it. Charles did that probably in the early 2000, I think. And after Charles died, and I guess it must have been about 2014, they were going to redo the dining room and the grill. And anyway, they were using a country club design firm from Atlanta. And Susan Arnold called and said, this looks awful. We can't do this. Would you help? And, so I came out and met with Nick. And anyway, and I said, this doesn't look like Southern Hills. It has nothing to do with what Charles did, which doesn't have to stay that way. But you have this all done, and then all of a sudden this just doesn't look like anything. It doesn't look like the club. And so anyway, they had me do it, which was great fun.
And the dining room and
the grill room, the mixed grill, I guess they call it.
And you designed all that.
Yeah, we figured out what to do, and the decorating and let's do this and that and whatever. So anyway,
man, and the experience you had accumulated along the way here,
exactly,
set you up for that special time, wasn't it?
Well, exactly. Like all things in life, it's this building blocks that you do for yourself, and you get there,
and we're unaware that's happening to us.
Oh, yeah. I think you just don't realize you're doing it as you along the way, but you are.
There was a plan, wasn't there? And we don't realize it.
Yes, right. Exactly. Yeah, because I never really had a plan. Like, this is what I'm going to do. Going to get from A to B to C to D.
But somewhere there was a plan up there.
I guess so. I don't know.
Like I said at the outset, we're here to tell the story of David Easton. Mm-hmm. And your part of your story, of course, is told along this way. Legendary New York architect and interior designer. And where was he born?
David was born in Louisville, Kentucky in 1937.
And from an early age, too, did he talk about that he had an interest?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he had his grandmother and his aunts all lived out in Chicago. And so his mother they would usually go up there for the summer because David was basically the only child till his younger brother was born when he was about 8. So they'd go up every summer to Chicago and be with his grandmother and aunts, and they'd go to Marshall Fields, which was the store. And they're on the, I don't know if it was the top floor, but one of the floors they they always had a house that was completely set up on this floor, and you'd walk in. They'd create a garden, and you'd walk in to the entry hall, and you walk through all the rooms, and it was all decorated, and it was this unbelievable kind of showcase. And David was just fascinated with that as a child, and just like, oh, this is what I like.
Right. And for a small child to walk into that had to be really impactful. And then his parents names?
Yeah, his mother's name was, let's see, I have to think about this. Dad's name was David also, and his mother's name was Marie.
All right.
Yeah.
And his father was what?
He was with the FDIC. And so when David was little, they kind of moved around quite a bit. And then finally his mother just put down his foot and said, we're not going to move anymore. Let's figure this one out. So they ended up outside of Philadelphia in York, Pennsylvania.
And she was then a homemaker.
Yeah.
But neither one of them were particularly artistic, as we know.
No, I don't think so at all.
So this then just came out of the clear blue sky, didn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
And I understood he drew houses in the back of public school primary readers on sketch pads and all that kind of thing.
Always, yeah. He was always kind of sketching. He
was doing, as you were doing in the second, third grade, probably himself.
Yeah.
So then his dream was then obviously to go to New York, I would imagine.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
I think the first year he went to, I forget what college he went to. He went to it, which he didn't like, and he wanted to go to New York and go to Pratt. And so his parents agreed. And so he kind of tells the story of them driving him over the Brooklyn Bridge and driving to Pratt. And then Pratt was probably not in the worst neighborhood, but was not a very good neighborhood. At one point during the early 1900s, it was a beautiful section. It was called, it was not called Bedford-Stuyvesant. Maybe it's still called that. I can't remember. But there was wonderful big townhouses there that belonged to the Pratts and all kinds of different families of New York. And anyway, Pratt ended up there, and his parents were just horrified with it and just sort of kind of said, okay, fine, this is what you're going to do. I guess you're going to do it. So but he loved it.
But that inner drive pushed him on.
Yeah, that's what he wanted to do.
So he went to Pratt's. Didn't he go to the University of Illinois and studied architecture?
He might have gone. That might have been the first place he went, but he really wanted. I don't know quite why he decided he wanted to go to Pratt, but it might have been just New York. You know, he kind of knew Chicago, but he wanted to go to New York.
Well, I'm going to give a teacher credit. Mm-hmm. Supposedly, it came from an art teacher, Herb Lee, who taught Saturday classes at the York Arts Center, which David attended regularly for several years.
Yeah, he was a neighbor of theirs, and David loved him and was very fascinated by he and his wife, and they told David stories of New York and going, the village and different areas in the village that, they thought David would be interested in. So it just sparked his imagination. I've got to go. So that's how that happened.
So there's another teacher that was influential.
Yeah.
So when he graduates from Pratt, he applied for a scholarship.
I guess so. I don't know. At the end, you always have to do kind of a thesis, and you have to do a project, and it's your thesis. And so then they have a group that comes in and looks at it. And one of the people that was looking at it and judging it was Edward Wormley. And anyway, David won the prize, which was to go to the Fontainebleau School for 3 months during the summer. And when he said, you won, and he said, David, and when you come back, give me a call because you can come to my office and work. And so David was over the moon because he knew Edward Wormley was very famous. He was, at that point, he was at Dunbar Furniture and was their major designer. And any of Edward Wormley's furniture that comes on the market is very expensive now and quite beautiful. It's mid-century, but it's just absolutely beautiful. Beautifully made and beautifully designed.
So what was David actually doing? Was he designing furniture?
Well, you kind of do a little bit when you're in school because it's part of things you kind of learn a little bit, but architecture basically. But so his project was an architectural project, but Edward being in the furniture business was also, it's just all co-mingles, so to speak. So furniture designers like architecture, and architecture, they like furniture, and, it kind of goes. It's just symbiotic, I guess.
So he was able to do both architecture and design, but then he became an interior designer.
Right. He wasn't really terribly interested in interior design. He liked the architecture point of it. But I guess when he went to work for Parish-Hadley was when he realized that this was what makes a house special. It's how you put all these elements together. You need Albert Hadley, who and Sister Parish were the owners of Parish-Hadley, and Albert was very much architecturally inclined. Still did beautiful interiors, but he had to get the architecture right first, and then you can make it all pretty, so to speak.
And then this is interesting. Edward Wormley was part of a circle of people that included Philip Johnson and Edgar Kaufman Jr.,
right,
who with his father commissioned Frank Lloyd Wright to build Falling Water in Mill Run, Pennsylvania in the 1930s.
Right.
So of course, we feel Frank Lloyd Wright architecture here in Tulsa.
Right.
What did David think of Mr. Wright's work, and then in particular Falling Water?
Well, I think he was fascinated by Falling Water because it's such a iconic piece of architecture, and it really works as far as how he made the airflow and things work in that building. And it looks beautiful from the outside. It's probably maybe a little strange and cold on the inside, but it certainly is an incredibly beautiful building or house. And I think he liked that. I don't think he liked all of Wright's work, but he thought, he's pretty much a genius of certain things that he does, that's for sure.
But not to be influenced by him at all.
No,
right.
No.
There was a book that influenced David, Mario Parraz's Illustrated History of Interior Decoration.
Yeah. It's sort of the Bible of decorators, a beginning Bible of decorators, because it goes through the history of decoration, so to speak.
And then it made him think of how the pattern of a carpet, furniture, pictures, fabrics, wall covering, and the hang of curtains, along with the fall of light they admit, all translates into making a room dance.
Yes, exactly.
And you know exactly what I'm talking about.
It all has to work. The light has to work in the room. Just everything. It's such a combination of many things to make a room special and come to life and make it sing, so to speak. It really does.
Right.
Yeah. It's funny, that was, when I first met David, that was one of the first things he ever gave me was a copy of that book. Yeah, because for him, it was a Bible. So therefore, I needed it.
And so when we walk in, and we should be talking about your place here too, because David had influence on this. But when we walk in, most of us can't. We like it, but we don't know why we like it, I guess.
I guess.
But I guess it's all those things put together that make it, even with the sun coming through the window here. Yeah. And in your house here, we are in which room?
This is a study.
Okay, right. And so everything was purposely done in exactly the proper space.
Yeah, David always was of, you would you found pieces of furniture that would work in the room, so to speak. And then you had to have something made so that it worked in the room. You would do that as well. And, and then it just, I don't know, there's so many things that go into making a room work and make it special. Where are you going to sit? Where do you want to sit? You have to have a table next to it so you can put a drink on it. Got to have the light there.
Well, you kind of touched on Parish-Hadley, but then he met Albert Hadley at a lunch, I understand. Is that true?
Right. I forget whose house it was, one weekend. And Albert he died a few years ago, was very charismatic and just an incredible talent. And he was always looking for young talent that could come to work at Parish-Hadley. And, he was impressed with David and just liked his manner, I'm sure, because David was very personable and very he's funny, and he knows how to be he's a social creature, or was a social creature.
And that personality of his put him into circles. Yes, we know he was terribly talented.
Yeah. You can be very talented, but if you don't have the ability to sit at a table and talk to people and at dinner or lunch or whatever, you're probably never going to get in the door. You have to be sociable, and you have to know how to sort of play the game, so to speak.
What you just said, young people will listen to them. That is a key point for them to listen to.
You have to. You can't. You can't be so arrogant. You maybe have all the talent in the world, but you can't be so arrogant to think that someone's just going to hire you because you're so talented. There's other things that go into it, really, which is just life. You should learn that.
And he had it all in one person, didn't he?
He did,
That person.
All in spades.
Right, right. So then with Parish-Hadley, he was thrown into what we call traditional design. Yeah. What was David's favorite design, or did it morph into...
Loved the Regency period, loved the Georgian period. I would think when David first started, he really liked the Regency period because it's much more kind of... it's not so, it's maybe more disciplined, I guess, as you could say. But he didn't, all the decorating part, which, fancy curtains and all that, is probably more Georgian, I would assume. The Regency certainly had fancy curtains, etc. But yeah, he also loved modern architecture.
Right. He didn't stay in one place, did he?
No, he wasn't you could never pinpoint David. Well, you could for a period probably in the 80s because he did so many big kind of Georgian houses, but he was capable to do anything and everything, and hated to be, that's what you'd go to David Easton for. You just that look, because he was much more adaptable, so to speak. Mm-hmm. He was much more interested in a lot of things rather than just one thing.
Right. So he leaves Parish-Hadley in 1969, and then what does he do?
Goes on his own.
It says here that he left Parish-Hadley in 69. After working for another firm, he established his own firm in 72 with a partner.
Yeah, Michael LaRocca.
All right. And then on his own in the early 80s.
Oh, yeah. They split finally. When I met David, he and Michael were living together. And anyway, due to me, that caused the split. But they stayed in business for the next, 10 years or 8 years or whatever. And much to David's credit and Michael's credit. And somehow they made it work. I just didn't go into the office, so to speak.
Right.
But anyway. But Michael was always nice to me and never was horrible. But anyway, it happened. Life happens.
Well, there was a lot of emotion there, wasn't there?
Yes.
Right. Then didn't he want this firm to include both architecture and interior design in the time that was kind of out of sync with the modern system? Yeah, a little bit. A lot of architectural firms probably, they may have done interior design, but it wasn't what we consider comfortable and pretty. It was much more, let's say, commercial, maybe. Really strict architects are very particular about what goes into the building as far as how that the furnishings are going to look. It's kind of like when Philip Johnson did a house for in Houston for the I'll think of the name. They're an oil company, the Schlumbergers, and it's a wonderful house. It's beautiful, but she had Charles James, who was really a fashion designer in New York, do the interiors. Well, I'm sure it probably horrified Philip Johnson because it just like this. He has this very clean modern house, and he puts in these things, but it all works. It's a very magical house. Well, his concept then wasn't put to test when he was commissioned to design and decorate his first Georgian house. Mm-hmm. He says this was a defining moment when he went from Bauhaus architecture to a classical architect. Can you explain that?
Well, Bauhaus that was in the 30s and I guess maybe late 20s. And it was very clean architecture, very much like the buildings the first big glass skyscrapers that went up, just all glass and steel. Very Bauhaus. That's what you'd kind of consider maybe Bauhaus, is just clean lines. And I once had a teacher who said, when a wall meets the ceiling for decorators, it's a celebration. In the Bauhaus, it's just very simple. It's just neat. When you get a decorator involved, it's going to be, you're going to have a crown molding. You're going to have something happening to make this a statement. But yeah, the first project that David did was for a man by the name of Ralph Falk in Chicago. And he asked David if he would design a Georgian house for him, which was a wonderful opportunity because David had never done that. And it was pretty good size. I mean, it was a good size house, that's for sure. But just beautifully detailed. And David loved it. And
so he could start from scratch.
Yeah, he could start from scratch, but that's what he loved. He liked it.
And Mr. Falk, is that his name?
Yeah, he was, Ralph Falk was, his company was Baxter, and then it became Baxter Travenol, and a huge pharmaceutical company. And if you go into a hospital, all the bags that they're dripping usually say Travenol or Baxter or something, and that's the company. And anyway, his father started it, and they lived in Lake Forest, Illinois. And anyway, he bought land on Green Bay Road, a beautiful part of Lake Forest, and David got to design this wonderful English house.
Yeah, something to take a chance with somebody who had never done this before.
Yeah. David had met him when he was at Parish-Hadley because he was married to his first wife, Suzanne, and Mrs. Parrish was doing Suzanne and Ralph's house then. I forget what street they lived on, but anyway, it was kind of a very nice, very, very pretty house. And anyway, they did all the decorating on the inside. And Suzanne liked David. And then Suzanne and Ralph got a divorce. And when he remarried, Ralph called David and said, would you design this house for me? So anyway, and David did. So anyway.
Were you involved with renderings in that?
Yeah, when he did that, I did renderings, and then we did renderings of curtain details and all that sort of stuff for him, which was great fun.
So that was your biggest job too, probably.
Well, it was, one of the kind of first big kind of things, doing all kinds of different things, which was great fun. So
right. I think he said that home sweet home no longer has the same meaning that it had in past centuries. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he said the changes in technology, population, demographics, and the economy have altered the way we live in our homes. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just, especially technology has changed the way we live in a house. We the ability to have anything and everything at your fingertips is kind of amazing. Good and bad, I guess. It's kind of like home sweet home was probably pretty nice and sweet and wonderful and kind of things we all kind of aspire to, but we still want the new things that we can have now, and also your house is, it's run better. The systems are better in a house. The HVACs, all those sort of things, the sound system, it's all just gets better and better with years,
I would still think that within that you could still feel a home sweet home.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would think most of David's homes were home sweet home. They were comfortable to live in, He made sure that they were comfortable. They came in and you felt like you were welcomed into a house.
Fair to say that David created English-style palaces for an American aristocracy.
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of, you living in New York and working in New York, and you get exposed to people, and that's where a lot of money is. And then, people come to New York from all over the world also, and they search out people to do work for them. So if you get established and you're well known, one thing leads to another. You're very fortunate,
Did he do much work in foreign countries?
In England and Mexico. Where else did he do? I think that's really about it. England and Mexico. Yeah. Canada.
Didn't he work for the Kluge, John Kluge?
Yeah.
And you talk about wealthy people and getting to meet them. John Kluge was a television industry mogul here in the United States. And at one time, he was the richest person in the United States. Mm-hmm. How did David meet John Kluge and his wife?
Patricia, was his maybe third or fourth wife. I can't remember now. But anyway, they were in New York, and they were looking at furniture at Stair and Company. And Alistair Stair was the owner of Stair and Company. And Stair sold beautiful English furniture. And they were, known, they were just a very good dealer. And anyway, John and Patricia said, who should we talk to? We want to build a house in Charlottesville. And they said, Alistair said, well, you have to talk to David Easton. So they called David, and Patricia and David met at the Carlisle Hotel and sat there over a drink, and David sketched out what the house ought to look like.
on a napkin,
On a napkin, yeah.
Wasn't he famous for doing that?
Yeah, David was very adept at, he could be talking to people and kind of, what do you want? And he could start to sketch something out very quickly. And the floor plan, everything. And I want to say not all the times, but a lot of times it pretty much fell exactly what he started out thinking about,
Those could be framed. They probably were. Your renderings have been framed, obviously.
Yeah,
right.
So.
But I just want to pursue a little more about John Kluge. Mm-hmm. In 1986, he sold the Metro Media television stations to 20th Century Fox for $4 billion. Mm-hmm. And then those stations would later form the core of what would become the Fox Television Network.
Yeah.
And the following year, Forbes placed Kluge on the top of his list as the richest man in America.
Mm-hmm. And John was he and David got along very, very well. And I think John respected David, and David certainly respected him. And John was very much, he didn't, he cared what things cost, but he was, all you had to do explain to him why this was good or blah, blah, blah. And John would, okay, fine, let's do that. He didn't, the only thing that he did probably in the house that David really didn't want to do, there was an existing house, and he wanted to keep the main part of the house on that foundation, and David would have torn the whole thing down. Well, it all came down anyway, but he would have just gotten rid of the foundation and started over and made it a bit different. And John was he was kind of like, well, we'll save money, we'll do this, and you're kind of like, okay, well, fine. So certain things you go, okay, fine, we'll work within that print then.
So what was the worth of that house when it was built? Oh,
I don't know. It's so hard to tell because there's so much that goes into it. And you add up all the prices, it just gets to be sort of silly, ridiculous.
But it was sold at some point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. She had some financial reverses and sold it, but for nothing. Yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah. So most houses like that end up being sold for practically nothing.
How big was this house?
I think it was probably 30,000 square feet, probably.
Yeah. And so you would describe it overall as what kind of a house?
It was a Georgian house, and it was very elegant, and it was very livable to live in. We were down there a lot for holidays, and anyway, it was just, the bedrooms were beautiful, the living room was beautiful, the library was beautiful, gardens were beautiful. It was just a beautiful house to be in. There were so many different facets to it, it made it a fun house.
I've often thought about houses that are that big. We have some pretty big houses in Tulsa, too, and just 2 people live there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Are we building houses that big anymore?
I think they still are. You kind of wonder why. Because you can't live in all the rooms, so to speak. Right. And if you have a house like that, Patricia wanted to entertain. So if you have a house like that, you need to entertain. And that's what she wanted to do. And they did, So, then you use a house if that big of a house,
Yeah. They gave a name to that house, didn't they? What was it?
Just Albemarle House.
And where did the Albemarle name come from?
Oh, it's the county that the house is in, Albemarle.
All right.
Yeah.
And so I was reading about the house, and it's, as you just said, by Patricia and then husband John. And then you just read about this, and it was in Donald Trump became the new owner of the entire estate.
Yes.
And that was in 2012 when Trump paid $6.5 million for the house. Sounds like a chunk of change, doesn't it?
Yes.
Right. And then we go down here and read about this whole, and there's David Easton's name in it. Home design, demanded top flight treatment despite its compromised position, it says. And so it became a Donald Trump house then for a while.
Well, yeah, I think Patricia, when John and Patricia got a divorce, she was giving money, and then she was given kind of X amount of dollars every year also. And Patricia did some good things with the money and made money and things, but then she decided she wanted to have a vineyard. And vineyards are very expensive. And it's kind of it's like horses and vineyards you probably shouldn't get involved with unless you've got a lot of money. And anyway, because of that, she ran into some financial difficulties. And then the banks caused, you've got to, anyway, they basically were told she had to sell all the contents to meet the bank's demands. And anyway, so that somehow he bought it, which he always buys things like on the cheap. You would never be able to buy that house for $6.5 million, or shouldn't be able to buy it.
Right.
Yeah. Right now, I think it's a hotel. I mean, I don't know what he calls it, but anyway.
And Trump owns it.
Yes, as far as I know.
Turned it into a hotel.
Yeah. So it's very small. I mean, it only has 5 bedrooms plus a master bedroom. So, it's not, it's very, it's a, what would you call it? A luxury hotel, petite hotel.
I'm just going to go through to some of the personality of David.
Okay.
He says, I built all these Georgian houses. We're talking about 15 to 25,000 square foot houses. Young people are not going to build that way. They still are up in Greenwich, but that's the last blast. We can't afford to. We're not going to be able to afford to. And so most people can't do that anymore, can they?
Well, I mean, there's still plenty of money out there to build big houses if that's what you want. But I think David's looking at it, or did look at it, as almost a moral thing. Should we be building houses like this? Because they cost, it puts a lot of people to work and does a lot of good in a lot of ways, in the industry as far as professional people that do beautiful things. But these houses, they take lots of people to run them. They take, it just takes an endless amount of everything to make all this work all the time. And is that how somebody wants to live? And it's most of our clients' kids don't want to live like that, I would say. Yeah, they don't want to live like that anymore. They don't want the silver you have. They don't want the furniture you have, So it's just, it's very funny.
So it gets sold in a garage sale somewhere.
Yeah. Or it goes to auction. And it used to be like English furniture, but it's so funny. I mean, anyway, how the furniture market is. English furniture has gone through such a slump. I mean, if it goes to auction, it just doesn't bring prices that it did, let's say in the 70s, 80s, and the 90s, and the early 2000s. Now it's just, kind of like nobody wants brown furniture. And it's beautiful. And even fine French furniture, people don't necessarily want to buy that. There are obviously people that still do, but there was quite a market for it. Now, not so much.
We're always giving credit to the English, to the French, and others, I suppose, about their design. Did American architecture influence foreign countries?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Probably. I would think so. Because it probably melds together. I would say it wasn't, because we picked up things from the English and French, and we made it sort of American in a lot of ways. There was a great architect in Chicago by the name of David Adler who was very adept at taking different vocabularies of architecture and making absolutely beautiful houses, and they're still beautiful. And they could be French, they could be English, but maybe with a toned down a bit, but just making them somewhat American, I guess. But so I think people still look, they pick up things from everywhere. It's just a mixed ball game, I think. I wouldn't say that the people would come to America to see what we do. That's for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
David said that books are such an important part of my life. They fill the bookshelves in my room. Let's talk about books, because that was part of it. And he says, I have more than 4,000 books. That's a plea for help, he said. It's like having 4,000 plus friends, entertain, educate, and give you comfort. So talk about books in his life and how much reading he did.
Yeah. David was a voracious reader. I mean, it could be anything. It could be about things that he was interested in as far as his profession, which would interest him. But it was also just any subject. If he got interested in it, he'd start to read about it. And he never read novels, so to speak, but he read history. And that's what he was interested in. And then, he did so many lectures over the years that, he'd do a lecture, let's say, on the Grand Tour. So then he'd buy every book that he could find on the Grand Tour, and he'd start to read about it. And then he'd underline things, and then he'd start to figure out what to do. And then he'd get the slides together. That's when we had slides, and all that had to be coordinated, and he would give a lecture. But he also taught school for a couple of years when he first got out of Pratt, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, he taught at Parsons. He taught the history of design.
Okay, so we have books for reading, but you also have books as interior design, decorating.
Oh, yeah. I guess they become decorating, but I mean, we have books on decorating, on gardening, on furniture, on painting, on just you name it.
Right. But in your other room there, you have a table with books on it.
Yeah.
And in your design studio, you have books here, books there.
Yeah. Well, it's part of how we like to decorate, so to speak.
Okay. That's what I'm leading.
It makes... David would be horrified if he walked into somebody's house and they had no books. He'd be just like, well, he wouldn't understand that. Books were a part of his life, and it for him, it's somebody who would be maybe bereft of curiosity, I guess, because he was always curious about anything and everything. It just didn't matter. And he would buy books on things, and he just loved to read and learn. He loved to learn.
And then, I thought you were going to say, if he walked into a room and he saw just a plain table with nothing on it, that would probably bother him.
Well, yeah, in some ways. And then some ways, some interiors, if that's what you've got, it can look absolutely beautiful. But I think for David, he couldn't imagine that necessarily. It would look like the room didn't have a soul to him. That books are life.
Right. And you want a lived-in feeling, don't you?
Yeah. And you want to look like you live there. Somebody lives there.
Right. They asked him his attitude toward money, and he says, well, I realize as I've gotten older, that's important to have accumulated in terms of what people have generally. Not a lot, but enough that I know that I could survive. He says, this apartment, which I know it's vulgar to say, but it only costs $834 in maintenance. And so I know I can pay that. And this project we're working on, the modular house down in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I'm going to go teach and live there. So then that's his attitude about money. Talk about Charlottesville, Virginia. Well,
that's where the house for the Kluges was in Charlottesville, Virginia, outside of Charlottesville. And at one point we thought we would go down there and build a house. And David never really wanted to retire, but he thought, well, maybe I would teach. I would go to the University of Virginia and I would teach in the architecture school or the design school or whatever, and, teach a couple of courses. And, I would still be working, but that would be fun to do. I would like to do that, which he probably could have done. We just never did it. We never went. Once they got a divorce, and then it got sort of complicated, and we thought, no, let's don't go do this. So we didn't.
All right. So we're talking about houses. Let's talk about where you lived in New York and the places that you lived there.
Okay. We had, David and I first lived in a townhouse on 79th Street, right off of Park Avenue. And it was just a one-bedroom apartment. It was very nice. It was very classical, and it was easy to live in, and it cost absolutely nothing. When we moved in there, I think we paid $375 a month, and we were there for 25 years. And by the time we left, because of rent stabilization, we only paid, I think it was $1,200. And during that time, we then built a house in the country. So we had this wonderful house in the country, and we thought, well, this is fine. We just need, when we're in New York, this works out fine, but we have a beautiful house in the country. And then finally, David he wanted to move his office. So we moved down to Spring Street in Soho. And the commute from 79th Street to Soho would take 45 minutes during the day. And David was like, I hate this. Let's look for an apartment downtown. So we started to look, and we found something on 20th Street right off of Fifth Avenue. And we moved there, and we were there for 16 years. So we were very much kind of find a place and we settle. We didn't move around a lot.
No.
The house we had in the country was very American. It was a shingle house.
You have it in your book.
Yeah, it's in the book. And we found it through some friends. We were looking for something to buy, I guess in the early 80s, must have been. And so anyway, we looked up in Connecticut, and anyway, we were at some friends' houses in Millbrook one weekend, and they said, well, there's this piece of property, and it's kind of neat, and it's close to New York. Why don't you go look at it? It's in Haverstraw, New York. And so we drive down from Millbrook, we stop there, and then we get on the Palisades Parkway, and it was like 45 minutes to get into New York. And we thought, well, this is ideal, because we didn't want to go out to the Hamptons. Going to the Hamptons is like a 4-hour drive, if you're lucky, in the weekend on the summer. And so we thought, well, this would be perfect. So I don't know, that was like a Sunday, and on Monday we bought and we didn't know anything about the area, except we had 7.5 acres, and it was a walled garden, and this wonderful little stone cottage. And it originally owned by a lady by the name of Louise Beebe Wilder, who was a famous landscape designer in turn of the century. And she lived next door in this kind of very nice American farmhouse. And they had been dead for a while. So anyway, but this walled garden was her garden that she experimented on. And anyway, she wrote a book called Color in My Garden, which we've got. And anyway, if you're interested in landscape architecture or designers, she's very well known. And we just didn't know anything about it. And we bought this thing. And David said, well, this is how we're going to build this house. And so we tore down one end of the walled garden and built the house with porches. And it was a beautiful house. It still is there. It's a very pretty house.
And you named it?
Well, it was called Baldebray, because that's what they called it. And so we just sort of left the name, but we never really said, come to Baldebray.
Well, I'm holding up in the book. That is just a gorgeous place.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, it was very, very pretty. That was for sure. Yeah.
And I should say the book I'm talking about is Timeless Elegance, The Houses of David Easton, with Annette Tappert.
Annette Tappert, yeah.
And forward by Albert Hadley. But do you ever wish you still lived there?
It was so funny. When we sold it, I remember, everything had been packed up, and there was just something I picked up at the very end the house was empty, and I drove up the drive, and I was like, okay, that's done. And I did not miss it. I mean, I loved it for 20 years. I loved it, but it was a lot of work, and it was, roses that had to be taken care of, and 7.5 acres, and just kind of thought,
Right. And so is this a rendering of yours?
Yeah, that was at the porch, one of the porches. We had 2 porches that came out from the house. One was for just sitting and lounging. And then the other side, the other porch was for dining. We had 2 round tables set up. And so we would, when the weather was nice, we had breakfast, lunch, and dinner out there all the time.
And by the way, this is on page 216 of the book, if you want to see exactly what we're talking about. As long as we're talking about the book, though, is there another house in here that jumps out at you that's in this book?
That David loved?
Here's Island Living, Nassau, Bahamas.
Yeah, that was the house for Michael and Betsy Dingman, and it's down in Lyford Key. And building in the islands is difficult at best because everything has to be brought in, and you're lucky if you can find very good work people to do anything and everything, but it takes a little bit longer to do everything, and you just have to have patience to do everything. But David loved it. He loved building that. He likes the idea of an island kind of houses. But that was a very kind of fancy house, but it was very. They had a huge, big center screen porch that a lot of rooms fed off of, and it had nice gardens and everything going on, and it was fun. And that was their main residence. They lived there all the time. That was the big screen porch that was kind of in the middle of the house that the main living room came off of, and the dining room came off of, and the entry hall you walk into there. So I think Betsy did not like air conditioning, so this was sort of where she loved to be. But the house was always the air conditioning. It had to be.
Didn't David like one big room, but then you'd have a setting here and a setting here and a setting over there?
Yeah.
Was that kind of his?
Which was our house in the country. It was one big room, and we had seating at one end and dining at the other. And then we had obviously a separate kitchen, and then we had a study for us and our bedroom, and then we also had a guest house. But he loved the idea of just one big room where you kind of did everything.
Did you throw a lot of parties? These would be great party houses, I would imagine. So.
Oh, yeah. No, we had a lot of people up always for kind of lunch on Saturday or lunch on Sunday, or they'd come up Saturday night for dinner or, things like that. And it was great fun. I like to cook, so it was fun to do that.
Did you ever pinch yourself and say, wait a minute, I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Exactly.
And while we have wealth here, not the kind that you're galloping around with. You had to do that, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, every once in a while you thought, oh my God, I can't believe we're, know this or know these people or we're doing this today. And you're kind of like, this is really something. I've never, I'm just a little boy from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And David felt the same way too. He was never thought that was his due. That was the way it was supposed to be. He was equally as thrilled with the things that happened in his life as I was. So we were fortunate.
Here's that Aspen retreat we talked about earlier. And whose house was this?
This was Tom and Franny Dittmer. And it was basically a builder's house. And David kind of went in and kind of blew it up a bit and made it much more attractive. And Franny loved modern art. And the first house that David did for them was in Lake Forest. They bought a beautiful Adler house that was English Tudor. And David went in and redid it. And it's in the book also. And that was when she really started collecting modern art. She had Twombly's and she had, Rothko's. And she had wonderful things. And over the years, then she collected other things. She put together an incredible photography collection for Tom in his office. And he always thought it was sort of silly, but it sold for a lot of money when he wanted to sell it.
I'm not here to sell books, but if you're interested in design, there's Timeless Elegance, The Houses of David Easton, and then David's own thoughts and reflections are throughout the book, and he gives credit to Annette Tappert for helping him write it. Yeah. And he gives you help in the very end and acknowledgement as well.
Yeah, Annette is a writer, and David met her years ago, and she wrote a lot of articles for Architectural Digest, and that's how David met her. And then at one point, she married a client of David's, Joe Allen, and anyway, David had done a townhouse for Joe, and then all of a sudden he married Annette, and then he did an apartment for them on 70th Street and Fifth Avenue. And anyway, she's a wonderful lady and great fun.
When David died, we'll talk about that. There are those who reflected on their friendship with him. Mm-hmm. Here's one who said that, I cannot tell you how many times I would fly back on the plane with him after meeting a potential client, and he would scribble the house on a napkin on the plane. and he would hand that napkin to the staff, and he would draw it up, and clients took that napkin and framed it and said, "This is how our house started." Mm-hmm. We kind of alluded to that earlier, but that's what would happen.
Yeah, I mean, he was always drawing. I mean, somebody just sent a picture. We were on a boat with a client on down the Bahamas or someplace, and there's David sitting at a table drawing away on, a pad of paper, sketch pad, and, figuring out something for a client that needed to be organized and done. And he was always drawing. We always took paper with him and was always drawing.
Which meant there were always ideas spinning in his brain constantly.
Yeah. A lot of times it could be a new project or it was a project that was going on that needed to be something resolved. How am I going to fix this? I've got we got to work this out, or, there's always something.
Would he have a sketch pad by his bed and wake up in the middle of the night?
Oh, he'd get up. He'd just get up and he'd go to the desk and he'd work.
Oh.
Yeah. No, but he always, not necessarily right next to them, but he'd always.
But in the middle of the night, he could easily.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'd find all of a sudden he'd be awake and he'd be in there working. It'd be 2:00 in the morning. I would say, okay.
What was his schedule like? His normal wake up time? And
his normal wake up time, he would usually get up like at 6 or 5. And then he would, we'd go to breakfast and the day would begin. And then I would, depending on what we were doing in the evening, I'd have to usually tell him to leave. He's got to go. I'd call up his secretary. He's got to go now. He's got to go. Or I'd have to go down and get him and say, we've got to go now. Because, we were either going to dinner or we were doing something. But he would work.
But he'd work into the night again, wouldn't he?
Yeah. He would eventually stop. But he would, And then he worked all weekend. He would go to the office all weekend. And he'd work all weekend, too. That was what he loved. That was his hobby.
Yeah. To get some of his charm, he had a habit of having his car drop him off a block away from meeting with a client so as to arrive less grandly on foot.
Yes, he would do that. I don't know. He didn't want people to think that he was being something special or whatever, So, and we always had, we had nice cars. We either had a Volvo or we we always had Volvos, I think. But he wasn't going to have a Mercedes, and we won't have that. So,
really?
Yeah. No, he didn't. No, you don't want to appear at your clients and, that. He wanted them to know that he was successful, but he didn't want them to think that he was rolling in it, so to speak. And a lot of clients thought he was just, architectural expenses to build a house and the architectural fees are expensive. But that didn't all come to David. It paid a lot of salaries. Mm-hmm. But I think they thought, oh, you're just rolling in it because look at you got this percentage on this house. Well, yes, but you have overhead. You've got to pay everybody's salary. You've got to give their 401k, their whatever that is, and you've got to pay their health insurance, and you have to do this and that. And David was always generous with his employees.
So he didn't want them to be staring at that Ferrari out front.
Yeah, no, he would have never, ever.
He never would have had one anyway.
No.
Right. When he would walk into a restaurant, he'd see the maitre d' and he'd get on his knees and say, "Will you marry me?"
Yes, right. Yeah.
He'd do quirky things like that.
He always did, yeah. He'd always ask somebody to marry him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't. Clients and also just, anybody and everybody, So, and they always were just, taken aback, but completely enamored of him all of a sudden, Yeah. He charmed them immediately.
Right.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it could have been embarrassing for you.
Oh, I got so used to it. It just like, oh, okay, that's what he's going to do. Right. I usually said, well, you're not the first.
Right. He gave birthday parties for clients' dogs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He would just think up things to do. We gave, I can't remember one specifically. The one thing I do remember, we had our first dog was a chow, Lily. And when she died, we had a memorial service for her. And it was at Johnny Nicholson's Cafe in New York. And we were in the townhouse that his restaurant was in, and David arrived in a Chinaman's outfit with the wig and the little hat, and we had white gladiolus, I think is what you're supposed to have at a Chinese funeral. And anyway, we had invited all these people, and David arrived and was going to read her will, Lily's will. And so Lily gave, I don't know what to everybody, but everybody got something. And then we had little framed pictures of her too as well.
He loved dogs, didn't he?
He loved dogs, and he loved having fun. He liked to. He was a great practical joker. Probably some of the things that he would do now, you probably can't do or shouldn't do to employees, or it might be not that it was politically incorrect, but it crosses the line now that you would probably get in trouble.
Can you remember any?
Well, most of the things were just absolutely. He would love to go to. There was a store called Come Again, and they had sexual toys and things like that. So he would love to go and buy that, any kind of sexual toy, and leave it for some new girl employee. And, if they laughed, and he knew we're going to get along just fine. And most of the time, always they did. So, but he did that to his secretaries. And all the secretaries that he had over the years got into the game too. They loved it. I mean, David could say, would you go and do I need this? And they'd go and find it. And they loved, just because they thought it was so funny, and he thought it was funny, but I don't think now.
No. Even his charm wouldn't work today, would it?
Probably not. There was one episode that he did that we had the lawyer came in and talked to him and said, we have to maybe stop.
About colors, he said, red is my favorite color, but I use it as an accent. I prefer a quieter background, stone, cream, gray. It's calming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you wouldn't see red.
Yeah, I mean, David did like red libraries, and he would do, and he liked color. I mean, we did very kind of pretty rooms for people. But I mean, for himself, he liked that. He liked that calmness, and then you would have pops of color.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because then you can put almost anything with it and change it. All of a sudden, if you have a red room that's all red, you're married to that unless you change it.
So what do you do to a red room?
If you want to change, you probably have to repaint and just do a whole new thing, So you have to, it's fine for some rooms. Obviously, like David loved that for probably very intimate rooms like libraries and things like that.
Yeah. He said, I don't believe in curtains anymore. I like an edited simplicity. The simpler things are, the less I feel the need to change them. Mm-hmm. Did that take him a while to come to?
Probably, like our house in the country had curtains, and they were probably elaborate. And then once we added on another bedroom in our house, we originally had a studio that was kind of our study that was also our bedroom. And then we added on a dressing room in our master bedroom. And then the curtains in there were just on bronze poles and rings, very simple. But in the rest of the house, we had helmets and tassels, and not tassels, but fringe and swags and jabos. And, it was kind of like it was done. And by the time we moved downtown to 20th Street, in the living room, we just had these blinds that we have here, these kind of solar-shaped blinds. Mm-hmm. And I think we had curtains in our bedroom, but that was it, just kind of to shut them at night. But that was it. Mm-hmm. So
when you were designing apartment or houses, you probably had your own idea about something, and it was different than his. Was that true? And you'd say, hey, I have another idea. Mm-hmm. You're shaking your head no. What does that mean?
Well, David was the leader, so to speak, and
You never challenged it?
No, I would say what I thought of something, and then we would talk about it, but I didn't know. He was the leader.
Well, maybe he listened to you, though.
Oh, yeah. No, he would listen if I thought something, well, why don't you do that, or what do you think about that? But no, David, rarely did I ever kind of question something that he was going to maybe do. I kind of like, I don't know about that.
But maybe you influenced him? Maybe he said, well, that's a good idea, I'll use it?
Yeah, I mean, it was a back and forth thing. But, I mean, it was definitely David, and I was there to help, which I was fine with.
We're sitting at this desk here in your nice home in Tulsa. I'm looking at this green parrot
yes.
right here, and he's stuffed. I don't know. I don't dare touch it. Is there a meaning? Did he love birds, or did he just find that?
He loved birds, and I don't know. We bought that in Paris at a wonderful shop that's been there since the 18 whatevers. And anyway, he just needed it, so to speak. So we bought it.
And he would travel the world, wouldn't he, and bring home everything?
Yeah, we liked to shop. He didn't like to shop for clothes, but he loved to shop for decorative things, architectural things, and just things that were part of the home, so to speak. You know, it could be a hurricane lantern that you would put outside on a table, just anything and everything. I mean, he'd go and shop. He loved to do that. That was great fun.
I suppose he'd buy things and he wasn't sure how he was going to use them.
Yeah, and it ended up we had a warehouse full of stuff and things that we thought, well, these are great. Clients never wanted them, or somehow we just anyway. So eventually, when we sold our house in the country, all that stuff that we had in the house in the country went to our warehouse and sat there for 2 years. And then we eventually had a big sale at Doyle Gallery and sold all that stuff. We kept some things, but there was a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff. And
Man.
Most decorators have that because they're always constantly buying, and they buy for themselves, but they buy for clients, or the idea that, well, that might work. And sometimes it does. And so then you have it, and then sometimes it just sits there. And then eventually you should probably think, how enough is enough, you know.
That's hard to stop though, isn't it?
Very hard. Yeah.
This house was featured in Architectural Digest.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't know how many years ago that was.
I think it was we bought the house in 2008. I think it was 2011 or 12, maybe, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonder how many homes in Tulsa have been featured in Architectural Digest, if any.
Thinking about it. I don't know. Probably not very many.
No.
Probably, no. I mean, how it happens is you have a connection, and you know, if you're a decorator, and Paige Rents was the editor at that moment, and you know, you get this relationship with editors of all the magazines, and they're always looking for shoots. They need to fill the magazines. And so anyway, somehow it all happens. And sometimes you have projects and you present it to them also and say, well, I've got this project. It's in North Carolina. It's in Aspen or whatever. And, you know, they look at it and go, oh yeah, we'd love to do that.
And of course, with David Easton as the name, your name as well.
More so David than me.
Okay. But they found this unusual that you'd be moving to Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then when they came here, they said, wow, more than likely.
Uh-huh.
I was just looking at what they've been writing about this house. Its central core resembles a silo tower. Mm-hmm. Inside, a design treasure blends their love for antiquities with contemporary sensibilities.
Yes, right. Exactly.
And it says, David believes that architecture should give rhythm to a home. It should be a symphony of design.
Sounds very poetic.
and they've quoted him as saying that. Yeah. I think that's interesting. A symphony of design.
Yeah.
And then they said that you pointed to the doorways, their tops accented with antique mirrors or architectural fragments. Maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah. All the door heights were nice, but just kind of to extend them up higher, we just added antiqued mirror above them in panels, and it sort of helps raise the ceiling even more so. I mean, visually, it doesn't do it exactly, but visually it makes it the room appear a lot taller than it is, I suppose. So,
right. Yeah. I'm looking at that right now, right above that doorway.
Yeah, it gives it a little bit more architectural interest, I guess.
Right. Yeah. And then the marble flooring, Architectural Digest said, and the absence of traditional draperies or other style examples distinguishing their home. So a little bit about that, and then and the flooring and draperies.
When we bought the marble floors were in, and David's first inclination was, let's rip it out. We'll put in old wood flooring. And I was like, oh, I can't do that. I just thought, I can't. I don't want to go through the mess because I know what that's like. And I thought, no, let's don't do it. Let's just leave it. And so anyway, now that we left, I love it. I think it's nice. One thing we did change was all the air vents were just metal air vents. And so we had those ripped up and had them done in marble so they were flush with the floor. And it's just a cleaner look. It looks much more finished. Mm-hmm.
Right. And then the absence of traditional draperies.
Yeah, we have curtains upstairs in the bedrooms, but down here it makes it all look, it just feels cleaner, and just a little bit more modern and sleek. Yeah. But the whole house has kind of a clean background that's very kind of clean and modern, but it's, again, filled with, upholstery and antiques and things like that. So it sort of calms all that down so it isn't so hard-edged.
Right.
Yeah.
You were talking just about the vents, and you and David did so much remodel and building and all. Did you enjoy the process?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did.
That's part of the journey. You have to enjoy that, don't you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you kind of look at it and there's always something that you think, that needs to be fixed, and let's see how will we fix that so it looks better, So anyway, just funny things like the windows in the living room that are on either side of the fireplace. When you first looked at them, they appeared to run up right into the fireplace, and there wasn't a balanced space on either side of the windows, and then you had the fireplace breast. And anyway, we're looking at it, and David came out one weekend to look at this, and he said, well, we'll just do this on this side, and then it'll all be balanced. And it was the simplest solution. And it was, at first I was looking at, I don't know how to fix this. And he was just like, no, we'll do that. And I was like, okay, that works.
But you've said earlier in our interview that David, you wondered how many, I asked you if David listened to you. You kind of questioned. He did listen to you on the marble floor.
Oh, yeah. And it's funny. I think when we bought it, and David definitely had buyer's remorse. He wondered, why did we do this? And I thought, well, it is done, and we're going forward.
And then the Architectural Digest talks about your dining room, says the dining room is a welcoming half-moon shape, says Steinmeyer finds perfect for entertaining guests. And then also, I want you to comment on that. There's a round 19th century mahogany table. And then you have the English creamware plates placed on brackets. So let's kind of talk about all that.
Oh, okay. Well, it was kind of, it's I don't know, very, not everyone has sort of a half round dining room, and it's just sort of inviting, and a round table is inviting to eat at, much more so than if it's just a long oblong, thing. I don't know, it's just much more gemütlich, as they say. And, the creamware set David had bought in London from Colfax and Fowler, and we had it for years and years and years, and it just never had any place for it. And then since all the background here was sort of this kind of cream colored walls, it looks wonderful. It sort of does the decorating, but it doesn't jump out at you so much, other than it does a lot of decorating, so to speak. So it was fun to have them out finally.
You're right. And they say the most notable change they made was covering the brick walls of the two-story library, and that's... Yeah. There
was a lot of brick in here. The whole staircase, the silo, was all brick, which... I mean, it was the same color as the outside of the house. And to me, it was just all dark. So if we had brick on the inside, we just covered it and then plastered it over and sheetrocked it up and then painted it, so to speak. Because to me, it was just so dark. I just didn't like the brick.
And then the digest says this library is the heart of their home and office, and that's where we are right now. Both contain treasured books, especially Timeless Elegance, The Houses of David Easton. And then the digest says that for Steinmeyer and Easton, their home is a perfect setting that encompasses their love for exceptional design and gracious entertaining. Most importantly, reflects their global perspective as world travelers who now love coming home from those travels to Tulsa. And I think we commented on all the things that you brought home from all your...
Here, there, and everywhere.
Do you think there's a country you two had never been to?
We never really did much of South America. David went a couple of times to Colombia, I remember. But never, I very much sad that we didn't go to Brazil or Argentina or Colombia. I've never seen them, just to experience it. So I'd love to see Rio and see what that looks like. There's a lot of places like that, and obviously we're in Mexico a lot, but just never got to South America, which is, I think, is sad.
Were you traveling? You see, David could have been, I think it was 83, and then 4 years, he could have been, when he was 75, 76, did he still have the adventure spirit?
Oh, yeah, he was still wanting to go, yeah.
So if it had not been for his health issue.
Definitely. Yeah, we would have traveled till he keeled over,
Right?
Because he loved to travel and loved to just see. When it first started, and we went to London a couple of times, and he enjoyed it, but it wasn't. He didn't have the same curiosity that he did, before all that. Because usually, he did the directing. We're going to go do this. We're going to do that. And I just followed along because he knew what. It was going to be okay. It'll be great fun. We'll see something wonderful, So
right. And then it says Steinmeyer says, quote, "Coming home to Tulsa really is full circle." And then Architectural Digest says the strategic move was New York City's loss and Tulsa's immense gain. And I would have to say amen to that. That's for sure.
Well, it's nice. I'm so glad we did make the move. It was easy to deal with David out here, and it's home. And all my friends in New York, wherever, say, aren't you going to move back to New York? I said, no, this is it. I'm fine. I can always go back.
Did you ever have some friends in New York who were skeptical, and maybe you invited them out and then they said, oh
yeah. Well, anybody who has come out here from New York, or, people who know us, have always been, oh my gosh, such a pretty city. It's a nice place. What a wonderful place to be. So yeah, I think everybody's surprised. It's, when they do see it, which is wonderful. So It's funny. There's a lady by the name of Norma Dana, and she's on the Central Park Conservancy, and one of the founders of that whole project. And she's 93 at this point. She grew up in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, and married a guy by the name of Charlie Dana, who had a lot of money anyway. And we immediately bonded when we went to a friend's house in Greenwich, because she was from Oklahoma and I was from Oklahoma. And she's, I think, almost a little bit of Indian too. I forget which tribe, but she's an absolutely gorgeous lady, and a lady. And anyway, it's so funny. She ended up her life in New York, but she wouldn't be back. But anyway, we bonded because we were from Oklahoma. So
yeah, it's a great place to bond. We're both lucky to live here, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
There's a fascinating story about Martha Stewart. And maybe you can tell the story, because there was a dinner and Martha Stewart sat next to this charming man.
It was a house, another client. Their house in the country was in Easton, Connecticut, Rosemary and Bill Weaver. And anyway, that was when Martha was just starting out her business. And she was, I can't think of the town that she was in Connecticut, on the water. And anyway, but she was starting out to be, doing really lots of things. Anyway, so she was at the dinner party, and David had never met her, and he was sitting next to her, and she was, he said, David usually, people would ask him what he did, and he would usually say that he was a sex therapist, because he didn't want to talk about what he did. But anyway, they somehow got to talking, and he said, well, he said what he did, and she said, well, what houses do you like? And she named some houses, and they were all houses that David had done. And David, well, okay, I did those houses. So anyway.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, and that's part of being in New York. You start to meet people who are at the top of their professions. And I don't know, it's this networking situation in life.
Did he ever do any work for Martha Stewart?
He tried to. She bought an apartment at 72nd and Park. I'm 5th. And anyway, some buildings in New York will let you put under the window air conditioning systems, and some don't. This was one of the ones that wouldn't, and she wanted them under the windows, and so she thought that she could cajole the board to let her do this. So she went probably for about a year trying to cajole the board to do this, and they were no. So finally she just sold the apartment, and she ended up going downtown and living in a very modern building that way downtown on the river.
So Jimmy, then we come to September 11th, 2001. And of course you were living in New York.
Yes. Yeah.
And let me just recap. That's when 19 militants associated with the Islamic extremist group Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 airplanes. They carried out suicide attacks against targets in the United States. 2 of the planes were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York. A third plane hit the Pentagon just outside Washington, D.C., and the fourth plane crashed in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Almost 3,000 people were killed during the 9/11 terrorist attacks, which triggered major U.S. initiatives to combat terrorism. So where were you living when that happened?
Well, David and I had an apartment then on 20th Street off of Fifth Avenue. And then we had our offices on Spring Street, which is, let's see, we were between Broadway and, can't remember the other street now, but right down there. But that seems very close to the World Trade Centers, but it wasn't exactly, but it's close enough, so to speak.
Right. What was your first indication of something had happened?
It was funny. I was talking to my younger brother, who lives in Texas, and I heard a plane, and it sounded very low. And every once in a while you'd hear planes flying low, but usually it was just kind of a small plane, and you never thought of it as a jet. And I was talking to him, and I said, that plane just sounds like it's so low, it's so strange. And this was whatever, I don't know, right before it happened, and it was... all of a sudden, people in the office started saying, "Oh my God, something's happened," and you were just like, "Oh, okay." And I think David's partner had a television in his office, and we watched that for a while. And everybody was sort of just didn't know quite what to do. You just sort of stunned. You were just watching it, and then at some point, my office faced south, and I had a window that looked towards the Twin Towers, and there was a young lady in the office, and she was standing there just kind of watching it and just dumbfounded, as I was. And all of a sudden, when they collapsed, and you were just like, I don't know what I saw, and that can't be what I saw, and you were just, I don't know if you were horrified, you were just numb. You thought, I don't know what that was. And then later, obviously, you just kind of go, oh, that's what that was. And you were just very, very shocked about the whole thing.
Right. Did you have a direct eye view of the towers?
Yeah.
And so you saw the collapse?
Yeah, just standing there, we were watching it just kind of because before they were just, on fire, and there was a lot of smoke and all that happening. And then all of a sudden, when they did collapse, you didn't know what you had seen. I mean, you just were so surprised and stunned, and it was you just kind of walked away and thought, I don't know what that was. I don't know.
So did it take you a while to think you could even go outside, or you kind of...
No, and Spring Street's far enough north of World Trade Centers that we weren't caught up in all the smoke and the collapse of the buildings and all that debris and all that whatever was in the air. We were, I don't know how many blocks it is, but it's quite a distance, really. But anyway, so we never got that. If you were closer downtown to the World Trade Center, then everything was covered in that ash and dust and mess, and that was awful.
So you probably went in that direction at some time, and
I never did. I never went down there. And also, they had cordoned it off. You couldn't get down there unless you were helping or working somehow. If you lived down there, then you could get to your apartment and do things like that. But there were certain areas you couldn't, and people couldn't come for the first week or so. You couldn't even get below, I think it was 23rd Street, unless you could show that you had some sort of identification why you would have something. Like we had our office, so we had identification with that, so we could go. And anyway, we went back to the office. That was on a Tuesday morning, I think, and so we went into our office Wednesday and Thursday, and everybody kind of the day that it happened, everybody left, and they had to walk home because they shut down the subway systems, and I would assume the buses were running, but I can't remember that in Manhattan. But you had to walk home if you lived in Brooklyn or Bronx or New Jersey, and they did it. Everybody did it. It was just like this great flood of people walking. It was just kind of amazing.
Right. So some in your staff had to walk home.
Oh, yeah. Not everybody could afford to live in Manhattan. So, a lot of the young people lived probably in Brooklyn or wherever. I don't know if we had anybody that was living in New Jersey then, but anyway, they had to walk home. And so, obviously we said, don't worry about coming in. That's not going to be anything. So anybody who was in Manhattan tried to get in if they could, So I remember one of the funniest, well, it wasn't funny, but it was so stupid. We had a client that was supposed to have Oh, let's see. She lived on Fifth Avenue, and anyway, she was supposed to have some carpet installed in the service area on Friday. So she calls up, and Kathy, Cloutier, who was David's secretary, answered the phone, and she said, "Now they're coming today to install." And Kathy was like, I don't think so, because they're not letting any trucks or anything across the bridges. And that's not going to happen. She said, well, it has to happen. It's on the calendar. And she was just like, well, I hate to tell you, but it's not going to happen. And then you realize, when you're dealing with very, very rich people, they just assume that it's going to happen. So anyway, and you're kind of like, were you here yesterday? Have you been watching the news? Anyway, right. It was kind of like we had another friend who ran Gloria's Food, who was it's a big catering company in New York, and very, very fancy one. And I can't remember, he was a producer or somebody from Los Angeles, and he was supposed to have a party on that Friday. And he called up irate that he couldn't have the party. And they were just like, not much we can do about this, and it isn't that big of a deal. It's just a party.
The word entitled comes to mind.
Oh, yes, very much so. Yeah.
And here we thought everybody was so glued to the TV.
Yeah, and there's other people think that their life's just going to go on exactly the way it was.
Right.
It was funny that day when David and I left the office about noon, because we just said, go home, everybody. And we went down to a restaurant called Il Cantinore and had lunch. And then for some odd reason, we had a car service, and I don't know why, we went uptown and went to the antique dealers and looked at antiques all afternoon. And then we went home, and we're kind of thinking, well, what are we going to do for dinner? Because for that point, we just kind of went out every night. So David said, well, let me go see what's open, And so he kind of walked around. There was a few places open, and they said, sure, we have food, but it's cash only. For some odd, all the terminals were down and all this things. We said, okay, that's fine. So, you're just sort of like, okay, well, anyway, we'll just see what we can do or can't do. And, that's when you realize you need money at home and, all kinds of things, So, but anyway, it was a strange time, that was for sure.
So even though you lived where you did, you were affected because you couldn't use plastic.
Yeah, right, exactly. All strange. It was a very strange day, that was for sure.
Yeah.
And after a while, you didn't watch TV. I mean, it was like too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just too much. I remember my brother called me from Texas again, and my nephew was so upset. He was probably 10, I guess, and he thought surely there's something that happened to me because I was in New York. And so Jeff said, would you talk to him? Oh, sure. I said, I'm fine. Don't worry. Everything's okay. But it's perception of what, if you didn't live in New York, it was kind of a strange, what is that like, So anyway, it was a weird day, that was for sure.
We've been talking about the 1921 massacre, and lots of people didn't know it till much later on. But on 9/11, I made a presentation to, I think they were 10th grade history class or social class, and I brought up 9/11 because I was going to play something back from Voices of Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And some of those had never heard and did not know about 9/11.
Oh, my gosh.
I know. And so where were they tracking in school or their parents?
Yeah.
And so that wasn't heard about. Is it any wonder that this massacre...
wasn't heard about. Right. No, exactly.
Right. Anyway, well, thanks for sharing that, since you were so close to that in New York. Mm-hmm. All right, so you're living this great life in New York. Something came into somebody's mind to move to Tulsa, Oklahoma. How did that come about?
Well, it would have been because we had the house, and then probably about 2013, probably David realized that he was having memory problems. So because David would always say, what are we doing? And I would tell him, and then he could come back to me 10 minutes later and say, now, what are we doing? Because he was concentrating on whatever he was doing. He was not concentrating on what might be happening in an hour from now, particularly. And so, which was normal, because that's just kind of what he did. I was used to it all my life, because I'd always say, that's what we're doing. And I'd have to tell him again, and I have to remind him again, because he was much more interested in what he was working on. But then he realized that he was having trouble. So he went to a neurologist. And probably 2014, I noticed on his schedule that he had a typed schedule every day, which we could get him for the week. And it listed everything that he had to be and where he was supposed to be. And there was a doctor on it that I didn't know. So I asked his secretary, who's this? And she said, well, it's a neurologist. I said, oh, okay. And so anyway, I go with him finally to this neurologist, and he's beginning then really to have problems. They ask you all these, when were you born? Where do you live? And all that, which he could answer. But certain questions they would ask him, like, wouldn't be the president of the United States, but I don't know. It could be something that probably you should know. I don't know. So, which was somewhat like David, but not, you probably should know that. And then the next time we would go, which let's say was 3 months later, then it was a little bit worse. So at one point, he just said to me, which was probably 2015, he said, why don't we move to Tulsa? And I was like, okay. Because I think he, in his own mind, which he never verbalized, he didn't want to be in New York and be around people that knew him and see him that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand. That's tough. Right. But you had purchased this house a number of years earlier.
Yeah, we bought it in 2008.
So did you anticipate something was going to be a move here? No,
we came out here one weekend. I don't know why. Might have been Easter weekend or something. We came out, we were with Charles, and he said, remember that house that I leased for 1 year? And Francie always called him the women's prison. I don't know why. And I knew exactly. I said, and I love these. These were built by an architect from Chicago by the name of Coburn. And George Kravis and Tim Smith built them in the late 70s. And Coburn's a very famous architect and did very simple architecture. And I remember when they were built, Betty Conheim took me over here to look at them. And I thought, oh, for Tulsa, these are really, really nice. And in fact, this was the one that I saw then. And I remember it and thought, these are just really exceptional. So anyway, so I knew what the place looked like, and David was with me, and he said, why don't we buy this? I said, okay. So we did. And then I think he had buyer's remorse, because he was like, why did we do that? I said, well, I don't know. We've done it. So anyway, so we had it and, got it done and fixed in the way we wanted to have it done.
And you refurbished, did a lot of work on this house.
Yeah. Did a lot of just kind of obviously cosmetic things. We changed the master bedroom a little bit, and the master bath we redid completely. But the kitchen was kind of basically what it was. We made some changes, and we kind of narrowed some doorways and widened one and put an antique mirror above them, and did just cosmetic architectural things to make it more pleasing to us.
Right.
And anyway, so it was all done, and we had it, and it seemed, and I think David was like, and David had been out here enough that he liked being out here and liked all my friends, and they were his friends. And so it was familiar to him. So he thought, well, why don't we do that? And I thought, okay, fine, we'll do that.
And it was a simpler way of life.
Oh, yeah.
From New York.
Yeah. David was getting, at that point, before we left, he was getting lost. He could get in a cab and get home. He had an address. He knew where to go if he had the address. But he couldn't walk there. He couldn't navigate. We lived on 20th Street, and Gramercy Tavern was literally down the street from us. And I could say, well, I'll meet you at Gramercy Tavern, and he couldn't get there. And, other places that we would go to all the time, like Union Square Cafe, he knew exactly where it was. It was 2 blocks from our office. I said, why don't you meet me at Union Square Cafe? And he couldn't get there. So it was just difficult, He never got lost that he couldn't get home, because in New York, you get in a cab, you got money, you'll get there,
Right.
But if he was driving, had to drive someplace, no.
This had to be horrifying for you to realize that this was coming on and unsettling to you.
Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah, it wasn't scary to move out here.
Well, I meant the fact that you saw this happening.
Oh, yeah.
This is dementia we're talking about.
Oh, yeah. And he just, 2 years before we moved out here, you could tell that he was just, David, if you had a new client come in the office and they had a townhouse that needed to be renovated, well, he could do the drawings of it immediately. I mean, he would just sit down and he would redo all the floors and make it all make much more sense for somebody. And it was just something he would do just instinctively. He could do that in a minute. You know, he'd work on it on the weekend and he would call the client and say, let's have a meeting and show it. And we always had to say, don't do that. We have to have them sign a contract. You can't give it away. So, but that was just instinctive, and he couldn't do that. We had a client that came in and they were putting two townhouses together, and he sat there for probably 3 weeks. And I'd say, and he had the plan, and we said, here's the program that we're working within. And he would come back to me every hour or so and say, now where's the stair going to go? And I'd show him, and then we'd do it again, and we'd do it again, and finally we didn't get the job, but we did a presentation for them. And then there was an episode where the altitude is really bad for dementia patients, which I didn't realize. And David, we had work in Aspen, and he was out in Aspen, and he got completely confused. He got up in the middle of the night and he had his suitcase and he was wandering around the streets of Aspen. And luckily he was there with two girls from the office. And I think that weekend he was supposed to meet me, and my nephew was getting married, and he was getting married. Where was he getting married? Oh, in Austin, Texas. And David was supposed to come for the wedding from Aspen. And he got to the airport but couldn't get on a plane. He couldn't figure it out. And so finally I told the girls, I said, you got to take him to the airport and you got to just make sure he gets on the plane. I don't know how to do this. And he missed it again. And so finally I just said, just get him on a plane to New York. Just get him home. And because I don't know what else to do. Yeah. So anyway, so that was the last time he really traveled by himself or with somebody, unless we traveled a little bit, when we moved out here, but I was with him, but he couldn't go on his own.
So then he had the official diagnosis as dementia in New York.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So our doctor, basically said, well, that's what he's got. And so just what do we do? And, how do you do it? So anyway, it was just, it made sense to move out here because everything was so much easier to deal with. I didn't have to worry about him getting lost. Every once in a while, he could do something out here. But he, I don't know, it just, going to the doctor's easier out here. Going to the hospital was easier out here. David had bladder cancer, and we had to go to the hospital with that. About, I think, 6 different times that we had to go for, I don't know, they would do some sort of injection or something and do a biopsy or whatever. And the first time he went, I mean, he was being his self, but he wasn't bad as I thought he was. And so anyway, the operation was over and he was in his room and he seemed perfectly fine. And he said, why don't you go home? You don't need to be here with me. So I went home, and then it was like 8:00 at night, and the nurse called and said, well, he's ripped out his IV and his catheter. And they said, there's blood everywhere, and he's locked himself in the bathroom. I don't think he locked himself. That was in the bathroom. So I said, I'll be right there. So anyway, I said, he's not dangerous. He's just, anyway. And so then I talked to the doctor, and he said, well, what happens in late afternoon, early evening, they get sundowners, and they really forget everything. Everything becomes very confused. So anyway, so then all the other trips that we would go to the hospital and he had to be there at night, I just stayed in the room with him. Luckily, we got a big room, and they'd bring in a bed for me, and I'd sleep and try to help him.
Well, it sure made sense why you were in Tulsa then, didn't it?
Yeah.
So that was St. John Hospital, I suppose, that you were in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, but anyway, it just, yeah. And I think the saddest thing is watching somebody who was so, loved what he did, couldn't do it anymore, and he couldn't read anymore. You could watch him read, or think that he was reading because he would turn the pages. But when he could still kind of read a bit, you realize that he was always going back to the beginning again, and he'd always go back. And then you realize after a while he wasn't really reading. He was just sort of in the motion of reading. And kind of thought that because he loved to read, loved books.
Yeah.
So it was sad to watch somebody just deteriorate.
What was the age difference in
13.
13 years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So then he lived here, was it 4 years before his death?
Yeah. We lived. David was here, and then in 2019 he fell and broke his femur, and so he was at St. John's, and so they did the operation. And any anesthesia really messes with dementia patients. If they're at one stage, they're at a worse stage because it really messes with their cognitive senses. Everything gets messed up. So when he had to go to skilled nursing because he had to learn how to navigate again with a broken something. And so we put him out at Montereau, and he was out there, and he did that and got to walking, and we had senior helpers with him. And so he had somebody with him 24 hours a day, his own help. And then he couldn't come home, I know, because it was going to be so complicated to have him here just because of the stairs and him getting up in the middle of the night, which he was doing before he got in the accident. He would get up in the middle of the night. I'd find him down here, and he was rearranging things, or all of a sudden he'd open up the door, the alarm would go off. It was just too complicated. Plus then he became incontinent completely. And so luckily we had senior helpers with him all the time. And that's when I moved him to Methodist Manor, and he had his own apartment in their assisted living, and he had his helpers with him. And then, which he was doing, okay. He knew me, and he knew, he would start to ask you a question, but it didn't make any sense. It just kind of a jumble of words. The words did not come together and make a proper sentence. And anyway, but he was kind of there, and then COVID hit, and then I couldn't see him. And that was just crazy. But yeah, so anyway, and I saw him twice just because he had to go to the hospital for dehydration, and one time because he fell. And anyway, that was, just something.
So when did he die?
I died on October 29th. And
2020.
2020. And what happens with dementia patients, I went to go to a therapist, and I said, what's the end game? What happens?
Yeah.
And she said, there's lots of possibilities, but one, they basically forget how to do something, like breathe, like eat, like swallow, and that's what will happen. Be something that's, one of those simple things that we instinctively have because all of a sudden we've had it. You're here, you know how to do that.
Right.
And so he basically forgot how to swallow. And so, one of his helpers called and said, how's David? And said, well, I don't think he's swallowing because he keeps the food in his mouth. And I thought, oh, great. Okay. So anyway, I think it was the next day, the Methodist Manor said we have to put him into their, what would they call it? Wasn't assisted living, it was their long-term care, because he needs more help. I don't know if he got that much more help, but anyway, because he still had his helpers with him all the time. But anyway, basically, he was just sort of there and just couldn't swallow. And, you just, all of a sudden, you can't take any fluids in, you don't eat. So there's basically 4 days, I think. And then that was the end.
Did they call you and said he had passed on?
I had seen him in the morning. I'd gone up in the afternoon, and I went home to get some dinner, and one of his helpers was obviously with him, and she called and said he stopped breathing.
Yeah. Wow. Tough. Yeah. And how old was he when he died?
83.
83.
Not really old, but
no. And let's see, coming up this October, it'll be a year.
Yeah.
And so it's still fresh with you, isn't it, his loss? Such a great mind. and great influence on your life.
I was very lucky.
Yeah, you were, and so was he.
Yeah, I think he'd probably say that too.
But there are forms of dementia. Was it Alzheimer's that they finally?
No. And it's so many. It's lots of variations, I guess. But they never said that he has Alzheimer's. And the only way that I guess they can actually see that is that they did an MRI and they can look at the I guess it's the plaque on the brain. Would show if there's a great deal of plaque, then you definitely have Alzheimer's. Okay. Yeah. Is what my understanding of how
so
it is.
It's all, I don't know what the word is, say, it's just awful.
Yeah, the whole, it's a horrible thing to kind of watch.
Whatever form of dementia.
Yeah. Because you have this person that you love and you know how they should be, and they're not. And it was funny, I always thought, David was never going to retire. And I always thought, well, he's going to go to the office one day. He's just going to die because that's what he does.
Right.
So it would never enter anybody's mind that this is what you're going to face in life. And I don't know if it's a hereditary thing. I don't think it is, but it might be a little bit. I don't know. But there wasn't anybody in David's family that I could think of that had that. Just weird. Just a horrible thing to have to watch, I think, especially just somebody who was just fun and vibrant and a great talent. And just watch them just lose all that. It's all gone. I mean, it's funny. He would sit here and he'd say, well, this is a pretty house. Whose is it? And I go, well, it's our house. And then he'd say sometimes, well, who owns this house? He didn't know where, he knew where he was sort of, but he didn't,
How did you, because there'll be people listening who are going through what you did, how did you handle all that? It had to be frustrating at times.
Oh, yeah. I was kind of lucky that I were able to have during the day, I had somebody kind of with David, got a really nice man, John, to be with him from like 9 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, which was a big help, just that I didn't have to answer all of his questions. And John would go for a walk with him, and John would just kind of there to help. The nights were hard because David they don't really understand time, I think, after a while. So he was just sort of impatient. If we were just sitting here and we were going to go to dinner, if it was 5 o'clock and we weren't going to go to 6:30, from 5 to 6:30, he would ask every 5 minutes, when are we going to go? And I'd have to say, well, not yet, but we're going to go. And so you try to answer the question and you try to keep your voice as calm and as level as it can be. And the best thing to do is answer the question and kind of turn and walk away for a little bit. And then you come back and you do it again. And you just do it again. And you have to be I guess I have a lot of patience. And I was just like, you take a deep breath and, so he was what he was. And I couldn't, just kind of have to do it every day. And I guess and then you also, I think you'll find yourself, my therapist was kind of like, when do you think you cannot take care of David? Because I never thought I'd have to put him in like an assisted living. And the only thing that made that work was because he had a fall and he had an operation, and it made sense to progress him into that. Because if I had told him, I'm going to move you to that would have never worked. So I was fortunate that all worked that way. But it's very hard to figure out what's your limit of what you can physically do or mentally take care of somebody. And I realized when he became incontinent, both ways, I thought, I can't do that. I don't think, I thought if he knew I was doing this, he'd be so embarrassed. Yeah. And how he let ladies help him, I don't know, but he did. And you just think, I guess everybody has a point where they think, I can't do that. And if you're fortunate enough to have help, please take the help. And then you can be there to be supportive as best you can. But you just wear yourself down. I remember Sean, who works for us, said after David was finally, where he was in assisted living, he said, you don't look as exhausted as you used to. Because it was just every day. And he would get up in the middle of the night. So you never really slept. You slept, but all of a sudden he was up, and then he didn't know where the bathroom was.
Yeah.
So you have to, get a flashlight and turn on the light and show him where it was. Or he'd be in the closet getting dressed, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning, and you go, no, it's not time to get dressed. We have to go back to bed. So, so you really have to be as calm and as you possibly can be. And I just, plus I'm not a yeller, and David was never a yeller. So I just, I thought, well, that doesn't do anything. You can't, and you just have to, with anybody like that, you just answer their question, but you don't argue. You can't say that's no, that's not the way it is. You just say, oh no, maybe you're right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, we'll do it that way. But you never argue.
Not everybody can do what you did. Well, we're all built differently.
If you can afford to talk to somebody, go talk to somebody. You need a third person that's not involved, that can help you and give you advice and say, no, you're not crazy.
And you can, you're frustrated.
Yeah.
But you can be frustrated through that third person.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can cry in front of the other person, and
right.
And just all kinds of things.
Right.
I guess you don't want to burden your friends either.
Yeah.
And I know at some point when I first realized David was getting bad in New York, I remember, going to dinner with one of my best friends, Claire Potter, and I'd tell her things and just cry. Mm-hmm. Right. I thought, I felt guilty.
Yeah. And you felt guilty.
Well, somebody has to sit there and watch you cry, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, my.
Anyway.
He was so fortunate to have your temperament, I guess, I'm going to say.
Yeah. I think
if you're a hothead yourself, you'd never, that had never worked.
I think it'd be, I feel so sorry for anybody that has to go through this and can't navigate it somehow.
Right.
Because it's not anything that's easy to navigate. And you don't never know how it's going to go. You just have to, I remember one day we were down at the office, and it was early in the morning, like 7 or 6:30 or something. I said, David, I'm just going to go home real quick. I'll be right back. I came back. I couldn't have been gone 15 minutes. And he wasn't in the office. And so he was somewhere. And this was 6:30 in the morning. And I thought, oh my God. So I got in the car and I started driving around where our office was. And I thought, where would he go? Where would he go? And I just happened to go across Peoria, and he liked to walk over where the church was, I think it's a Methodist church. Mm-hmm. And there was some flowers there that blew, and he would like to go over there and pick them. And I thought, well, maybe he went over there. And he wasn't there, and I came back onto Peoria, and there he was. All of a sudden, he was crossing Peoria, and somebody was helping him walk across Peoria. Mm. And he was walking over there's a gym right there, right next to the Brook Theater, and somebody was walking, so they walked him over there, and I parked the car and went in and got him. He said, oh, there you are. And I said, yeah, okay. Well, are you okay? He said, yeah, I'm fine. I was looking for you. I said, oh, okay. Well, you found me, so let's go back. Anyway, but I mean, you have moments like that, and even here, he wanted to walk Lola, our dog, and he would all of a sudden go out the back here, and he wouldn't come back, and he wouldn't come back. So I would get in the car and go look for him. And then all of a sudden he'd show up, and then a couple times he would left Lola someplace, so we'd have to go look for her. And then so finally we put a gate on there so he couldn't get out because it was just too. I just thought, I can't do this, and I can't. Yeah.
And you had to be tired a lot because you wouldn't get a good night's rest, would you?
No. So
that made you.
Yeah. You just get kind of worn down, and you just,
So what you just described, was that the last 6 months of his life, or was it the last? Well,
he was in Methodist Manor from January to October, and it was the period before, probably the whole year before that. It was when he was probably the worst, and probably not horrible to live with. We just had to figure out, how am I going to navigate this?
Yeah.
With him getting up in the middle of the night, and we tried sleeping pills, and we tried different sleeping pills, and had to go to a psychiatrist for that because the ones that Dr. Gowie could recommend weren't strong enough. And then, so then you get those, and those probably didn't work, and it was just like, oh God, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd be fine because if he didn't sleep, we'd go to the office, and then all of a sudden he'd be sitting in his chair and he'd fall sound asleep. And he never complained. I was lucky and he was never frustrated. He never said, I don't remember and I don't understand, and he never got angry about it. He just never did, which was, for me, so thankful, because I never had to deal with that too. Yeah. So, again, a lot of people have that where they get angry, and he was never angry.
I feel fortunate at a party you brought him to, and I got to meet him, but little did I know who I was meeting, as I now know about him since I've done this research. Yeah. And he was saying quirky things then. Oh, yeah. And many things.
He liked to say things that would maybe shock people, especially about religion and Christ, because he was a Catholic. He was brought up Catholic, went to Catholic school, but just could not tolerate it. And so he'd love to say outlandish things about religion and things like that.
And Jesus was his favorite topic.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm glad, but he was just a shell of the man, because he was, by that time, he seemed like gotten smaller from what I see pictures of him. His face was fuller, and he'd lost a lot of weight, hadn't he?
Yeah. Finally was down to 110 pounds, I think. So, because it just, they lose their appetite. And the only thing that really interests them are sweets. So, we tried to give him anything and everything was sweet, just so he'd have something that he liked to eat, So anyway, but he always liked sweets. He always liked sweets. And anyway, I was very lucky.
If my world had been in the world of design, then I would or should have known him, probably should have known who he was when I met him, but I didn't.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to apologize for that, but not all of us can. Our interests follow that world.
No, not at all.
But it was just an honor to know him. I can still see him there, and I love that coat that he had. You showed it to me. I love that. And all that. Yeah. Did he love clothes? He was a...
Yeah, it's funny. When I first met David, he always liked clothes, but I would say he was just almost more interested. We went to a tailor and he had his clothes made, and even had his shoes made. And it was the lining of the jacket that had to be a certain way. And, he loved that. And we went to London, had all of our clothes made at Anderson and Shepherd. And he just, suits and sport coat, not all of our clothes, but that. And he loved that, loved picking out fabrics. And then, can we do this to it? Or can we, they didn't get outlandish. They were very traditional coats and suits, but he loved that, And then he got to the point he did not like to go shop. So, I would just go and order shirts for him and, khakis that I knew, okay, well, that's his waist size. And then, because if I took him someplace and he said, okay, we got to try these on. He said, I don't want to try them on. I'll just buy that. That fits. And I said, no, you can try it on. He was just, but originally he was really, really particular about it all. But he loved to get dressed up and loved clothes. So.
But it seems like I read somewhere, he said something, ties will go away, or I don't know. No?
I don't know. Yeah, right. It's funny how, when I was first in New York, you wore a coat and tie to work. And, New York was dressed, you wouldn't have thought of going to the theater unless you had a coat and tie on. For certain restaurants, you certainly had to have a coat and tie on. And then it slowly got to the point where it got less and less. Mm-hmm. There's still restaurants in New York you should wear a coat and tie, and you probably do wear a coat and tie. Mm-hmm. But it's gotten very relaxed. So
very, very relaxed.
Very relaxed, that's for sure. It's like the airlines.
Right. I think you gave some advice, but I always ask about advice that you would give to young people who want to be an architect and designer. And before you get into that, nobody can try to be a David Easton. The nation knows very, very smart names, and they may not know a David Easton, but David Easton would belong in those very smart minds that we know about, who have created the Bill Gates of the world. Yeah. David Easton, mind could be in that world.
Well, in David's profession, David was very much a star. He really was. There's a lot of people that, because they worked at David Easton's office, have offices. They were thrilled that they got to work under David and, have him as as their boss and their mentor, and they learned something, and they were able to go out on their own and have clients and do whatever.
And use the name I learned.
Yeah.
So
even selling a house, there's a lot of houses that they say designed by David Easton, and it has a certain cachet in like Palm Beach and Aspen and New York and things like that. In Connecticut, Greenwich, it has a certain cachet, and who knows, it should.
So you drop a pebble in the lake, and we see that goes out from that pebble. That's going out still today.
Oh yeah.
From David Easton's pebble.
I mean, eventually it'll probably die out, but I mean, you don't know. I don't know, but it's funny. It was like, it's amazing when you think about it, that all these different people, it's this big thing. In fact, there was Parish-Hadley did a book a couple of years ago. It's called The Tree of Life, and basically it was just about all the different people that worked at Parish-Hadley and on their own. And it started out like this, and it's like this. It's just sort of amazing. And everybody, I owe my whatever because of that, because that's where I worked and I learned all those things, all that.
Right. And then we're all human beings, no matter how smart we are. To hear you describe the end of his life, from what he was, and it all comes down to just being human beings, doesn't it?
Yeah. I was very lucky because I met David, and he. I needed to get a portfolio together for Pratt. I mean, not for Pratt. I mean, it was at Pratt, and I needed to get a portfolio so you can go out and get a job. And I had met David through Carl, and so I went over to his office one day and showed him my portfolio. And I said, this is nothing that I really like. It was things that I had to do when I was at Pratt. Pratt was, at that point, still very Bauhaus, but it wasn't really anything I really liked. And he said, well, you shouldn't have that in your portfolio. If you don't like it, it doesn't make any sense. Why would you show that to anybody? Oh, it makes sense. Anyway, and then it kind of ended up, we went had dinner together after we'd go into a concert together. And he asked me to go to Mexico with him. And I said, oh, sure, I'll go. That'd be wonderful. And so anyway, that was like a Friday night. And he goes home and I go home. And I call him on Monday morning. And I said, well, I've got something I need to talk to you about. And so anyway, we go to lunch. And I said, well, I'm engaged to be married. And he was kind of looked at me and he said, well, I don't know what to tell you, but you can't have your life both ways. If you think you can have a life being married and being gay, you can't, because you're going to hurt somebody. And he said, if you want to screw your life up. Don't screw somebody else's life up.
Yeah.
So he said, just make up your mind. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
So anyway, I called the girl and I said, I can't. I went out and saw her. She was going to the University of Michigan, and I said, I can't get married. Didn't give her really an excuse. I just said, I can't get married. And I went to Mexico, and David and I went together. So, but I mean, David was very much that way, where he kind of looked at something and gave you good advice and said, I don't know what, you have to make up your mind, but this is what I would do, or this is good, this is sound advice.
It was so sound advice.
Yeah, so I was very lucky with, like, Betty Conheim telling me to get out of Tulsa.
Right.
And I was very lucky that he did what he did. And I made a right turn when I should have made a right turn,
Exactly.
2 times in my life, and changed my life.
Right.
I was very lucky.
And this could be a whole nother story about you being gay, David being gay, and that's a whole nother story, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Of life and either how you was prejudice.
Oh, yeah. When we were first together, he had a separate telephone line, and I had a separate telephone line. And I wouldn't answer his line, and he wouldn't answer mine. And it wasn't, eventually that died away. But, even traveling, our travel agent would put David Easton in party. And so I was always, they wouldn't put my name on it. So, but they knew there was a guest that was going to be in David's room. And I remember coming out to the Beverly Hills Hotel, and I arrived, and David wasn't there yet. But I knew we had a reservation. I said, well, it's under David Easton. And I said, well, it's David Easton and party. And I said, well, I'm the party. And they said, well, we can't give you a room. And so eventually that changed. But it was stuff like that you just thought, oh, my God, I don't know. And David was very even careful with clients. He didn't tell anybody for a long time. And then I remember he went to dinner one night at the Weavers, and he was supposed to come home for dinner, and he didn't come home. And it was like 10:30 at night. And so I got dressed, and I was going to head down to the office to see where he was, what was going on. And all of a sudden he walks through the door, and I said, where have you been? And he said, well, I was at the Weavers, and they said, why don't you stay for dinner? And I said, and you couldn't call me? He said, well, I didn't know how to. I said, well, you could have said, hello, Susie, I'm not going to meet you. I can't meet you. I don't care. Just call me. Don't do that. Don't ever do that to me again. And so I think from then on, he all of a sudden started, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. I'm introducing you and you're introducing me, and that's the way it's going to be. And we just started doing it. Living in New York helped because you're much more acceptable society. But even out here, I would never told my parents.
No.
My dad died when I was 30. He never knew, I don't think. And I was with David then for 5 years. And when my mother got sick with ovarian cancer, so I was out here with my brothers, and I said, and I don't think they even knew. I said, well, maybe I said, I live with David. And I said, should something happen to me, you're not going to come to the hospital and decide what's going to happen. David's going to make the decisions. And I said, I don't know how you're going to tell Mother, but that's what we're going to have to do. If that would happen. And so anyway, so I thought, well, I never thought I would tell my mother. And so I thought she got to know that I was with David, that he was my friend, but she never asked. And I thought, if she asked me, I will tell her. But I didn't think she wanted to explain that to her friends, just because of the era that she grew up in and just out here in Oklahoma. And I thought, okay, that's fine by me, but I'm happy, I don't care. And then I was perfectly happy in New York. And, then David and I were just accepted. That's where life was.
Right.
Yeah. So it was never any stigma after, certainly by the 80s, early 80s, there wasn't any more stigma.
Right. You must feel sorry for young people who are afraid to announce to their family.
Oh, yeah.
And then when they do, how they're ostracized.
Yeah. And, I guess you don't know how your parents are going to accept it or not. I don't know if my parents, I think Mother probably would have. I don't know about my dad when I think about it. I don't know. That's probably not fair, but I don't think, just because of the way he grew up. And I don't think so. But anyway, so, and it's a hard, because if you're just ostracized, it ended up, David was my family, even though I had two brothers. I'm close with my brothers and love my brothers, and we get along and have a good time together. But David was my family, That was it. And I think a lot of gay people end up that way. They end up, let's say, with a partner or friends, and they become their family because they're accepting and because they love them.
Right. It's been a tough way. However, maybe it was easier for you.
Easier for me than it was for, David.
Right.
Yeah. When I first met him, let's say. It was easier for him going to school and things like that, So, he was lucky to be in New York because that was probably more accepting,
Yeah.
But still.
Did you question your sexuality early in life?
Well, I thought, oh, gosh. I knew I was attracted to men, but I thought, couldn't be that way. When I was in college, things happened to me, but I took a shower, and therefore that didn't happen.
Right. Right.
So I thought, that's why I got engaged and got married, because that's what I was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm supposed to do that. I'm supposed to get married. And I probably would have done it had I not married David. And he'd said this.
Oh.
Yeah. Because you just think that's what I'm supposed to do.
When you were at Edison High School, did you date girls there?
Yeah.
You did. Yeah. And you did all the things you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And you were confused too, probably.
Yeah. More so in college than I was in high school. I guess I probably didn't think much about it in high school. But when I got to college, I think just by being away and just going to college and just doing whatever, it's very funny. There's this very funny book called When I Knew, and it's all these funny stories of gay men and women and when they knew. And they're just sweet, and some very tender and some very just hysterical. There's one about a girl who comes down and she's telling her grandmother that she's a lesbian. And the grandmother says, "No, you're not. You're Lithuanian." I mean, it's stuff like that. You got to laugh about it.
Okay, then I'm going to have advice in two areas then. To the people who are listening and their son and daughter is going to come to them and announce that they're gay, what would you say to those parents?
Well, I would say, surely you love this person and enough to respect them and respect them that they have a mind to make up their own decisions about their life. And that's okay. It can't be your life. It's their life. And you should give them the opportunity and the love to have a life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
How about young people in the world of architecture or design and all? I guess they just have to follow their dream. If they have to do it, then they have to do it.
Yeah, you got to try. You've got to, if that's what you want to do, then just go do it. And if you don't, you'll always think, well, I should have done that. Or you have that, what if I had done that? Mm-hmm. I'd be very sad to think, I think, and a lot of people do that. I mean, later on in their life, they realize that's what I want to do. I'm going to go do it now. Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully you do, life gets to be very short, especially, I think I'm 70, I'm not that old, but I think, good God, how many more years do I have? And then you think, you just think, life is pretty fleeting.
Right. And at 70, you see yourself working for 80, 90 years old, don't you? The kind of work you do.
Yeah. I can, as long as if I don't decorate, I can always paint. I can do something, and so I like the idea that I go someplace and work and do something, and probably won't do it as much, but I'll still want to do something. Right. I don't really have a hobby, so to speak. I'm kind of like David. I don't have a hobby. Right. Do what I do.
Right. And so what are you doing now?
Well, still doing decorating, which is great fun. And then also doing renderings for clients of what their houses look like, their interiors look like, which I like.
So, you're probably backed up on your work on all that.
They take a while to get done. And I love that.
How would you like for us to remember David?
Oh gosh. I think that he was a kind, thoughtful person. Yeah. Funny. I think. I think a great talent in his field, and that he was a good mentor to a lot of people. Yeah. And gave of himself to people. He loved people. And
was he willing to take time?
Yeah, always did that. Always took time with anybody who worked in the office, and he was even funny with clients' children, that might be having some sort of silly problem or whatever. He would take the time just to sit down and talk to them as an adult, and it's so funny. A lot of them have all said, they just respected him because they just that he talked to them like an adult as a child or whatever.
No baby talk from him, was it?
Yeah, no. He would try to talk to them and help them and or whatever. So, he was sweetheart. So,
but you're so accomplished yourself.
No, I don't know.
No, you do know, and you're very humble about all that. and so accomplished. And so you didn't just ride on the coattails of David. You created your own coattails.
Yeah.
And you were that kind of person. How would you like to be remembered?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, I don't know. I guess as a good person, and I think I'm a good friend to people, and I'm generous and thoughtful. I think those are. I don't know.
And I'm quite certain, and I know for a fact, that's the way you will be remembered. And I want to thank you for giving us this time, a couple of hours here to reminisce about your life and the life of David Easton.
Well, thank you.
For Voices of Oklahoma. I appreciate it very much, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thank you, Jimmy.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.